In this video, I'm going to explain how business owners are publishing strategic books in 2026 without writing themselves and without using AI. So if you're a business owner who is busy, but who also understands the strategic value of a book, then this video is for you. And if you stay until the end, you'll have a super clear understanding of what the writing and publishing process looks like and what it looks like to work with a strategic ghostwriter like myself. So, a little bit of context. Over the past couple of years, I have helped entrepreneurs, business owners, and executives write and publish books, oftentimes without writing a single word. And so this video is about that process. Now, a lot of these books have generated 6- and 7-figure client leads. They've gotten their authors on stage. They've been used to land consulting contracts, and they've become really cornerstones of the author's personal brands. Now, what I am talking about when I say a strategic book is it is a book that drives business value for yourself, for your business. It's not any book. It's not necessarily just your life story. It could be based on your life story, but it's a book that has a particular end goal, whether it is to drive more business or to create a personal brand or create more impact. So that's what I mean by a strategic book. And that's also what I refer to when I talk about strategic ghost writing. Now, before we get into this process, let's address the elephant in the room. It is 2026. AI is everywhere. So why not just use AI? So AI has not changed the fundamental challenge of writing. It hasn't solved the fundamental challenge of writing. A little bit of context. I am a professional writer by trade. I studied English and professional writing. I've held numerous writing jobs. I've been in the writing and the publishing industry for over a decade. And I started this business because I saw so many people in business, especially, struggle with writing. And yet they had ideas that were worth sharing. And so that's why I got into the business. And then in 2022, AI became omnipresent with the launch of ChatGPT. And of course, AI has got significantly, exponentially better over the years. But AI hasn't solved the fundamental challenge of writing. And I see this all the time. People reach out to me with things that they've written with AI. So what I mean by AI has not changed the fundamental challenge of writing, especially for a book, is that in order to write a great book, and the emphasis here is great book, you need a process and you need to know what a good book is. To give you an example, a few years ago, I think it was, I was at a business networking event in downtown Toronto, and someone, a business professional, an entrepreneur, I think he had a consulting business, handed me his book. And we talked about how we could potentially partner together. And so I went home that night and I looked at the book, and the book was terrible. And I think this was pre-AI. It didn't feel AI generated, but the book was badly written, badly formatted, didn't have a proper positioning. And to me, that kind of sloppiness indicated that the guy would be sloppy in other ways in business. And I kind of saw that from the website and from his online presence. So it's imperative that you write a well-positioned book if you want the book to drive business value for you. And so there are books that were terribly written before AI. And of course, there are a lot of books that are terribly written with AI. So that hasn't really changed because AI cannot just pump out a book, even if your prompt is great, even if you put the raw data, even if you put, everything in there, it just won't. And the reason it won't is because it is a human process that you need to follow in order to write a book. And yes, AI can help with parts of the process. If you're really familiar with the process, you can get something decent out of AI and you can use it in your process. But if you're not familiar with that process, then it's useless. And again, I see it all the time. I have people come to me with books that they have used AI with. And very often we need to do a lot of heavy lifting in terms of repositioning, in terms of improving the style, making sure that it has the author's voice, and all of these different things that make a book great. Which leads me to the second point, which is you need to really know what a great book is at a technical level. There's the structure, there's the style, there is the voice, there is, should you have references, these kinds of things. If you know all of these things, and if you're using AI, then yes, you can get something decent. Provided that there's a lot of editing done, there's a lot of back and forth. And so because of that, if you don't have a professional writing training, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get something good with AI. And so that's why I recommend business owners not to use AI, or at least not to do it themselves and use AI. It's okay to get a skeleton, to get something, to use it, to gather thoughts and ideas, but it is not a good idea to just use AI and try to wing it, because at the end of the day, AI won't publish the book anyway. And so you're going to run into this wall where, okay, you have a book, now it needs to be edited, now it needs to be formatted. And if you go to a traditional publisher, they will see that it's written with AI, and any good editor is going to tell you, well, it could have your voice more, it could be more, it could flow better, all of these different things. So you're going to run into the issues that in the end anyway. So that is why I recommend not using AI. Now, this is why I recommend using strategic ghostwriting. And just to put things into perspective, there are other ways to write a book. You can, if you have a decent knowledge of book writing, you can do it yourself, and then you can hire an editor. And this is something that I do with some clients who have a manuscript. There's also book coaching, which can be a great option if you want to do it yourself. But again, for most business owners, this is not the way, because they don't have the time. And really, to put things into perspective, typically and this is with my process at Trivium Writing, which is very streamlined, you're still required to invest about 5 to 7 hours per week on the book if you're writing it yourself with our process. With strategic ghostwriting, you're looking at 1 to 2 hours per week of interviews without preparation. So it's a significant difference in terms of time. And so that's the primary reason I recommend strategic ghostwriting. Now, if you're not very familiar with ghostwriting in general, you should know that ghostwriters are professionally trained to write in other people's voices. In fact, many famous books were ghostwritten. The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump was ghostwritten. Becoming by Michelle Obama. Spare by Prince Harry. These are all ghostwritten books, and they are in the author's voice. And so the way that I personally do it at Trivium Writing is that I have, from a list of stories and concepts that we come up with together based on your personal and professional story, I create prompts and questions that I'm going to ask you during interviews. And so that takes about 1 or 2 hours per week of your time. And this creates conversations and transcripts of your voice. And so because it's your voice, it's really easy to actually write in your style with your ideas and with your very words, in fact. So because of that, ghostwriting saves you a lot of time and energy, and it allows you to get more out of your book. So you don't have to put everything else on hold. You don't have to take a year, and you can just come to these interviews and get the book done. Now, strategic ghostwriting specifically means that we are extremely strategic about the process from end to end, from what the book is supposed to do to how we are writing it, how we are publishing it. So the first thing that I always do with clients is figure out the goal. So ultimately, what do you want the book to do for you? Is it lead generation? Is it authority or personal brand building? Do you want more speaking gigs? Do you want better client conversion? Or are you more interested in your legacy and your credibility? And there's no right or wrong answer. It really, and it can be a combination of multiple, but you have to be really clear because this will inform how we're going to go about the process and how we should publish, which leads us to the different types of publishing. This is one of the most common questions when I talk to people at the very early stage of their book. They want to know, should I publish traditionally or should I do self-publishing? Ultimately, it's all trade-offs. It's the same as in a business, whether you do, for instance, organic content, paid advertising. It's trade-offs: money, time, effort. It's the same with whether you get a loan, whether you get government funding, whether you use you reinvest your profits. It's always trade-offs. Everything's about trade-offs, including traditional and self-publishing. So with traditional publishing, not only is it very competitive because so many authors are wanting to get published, so it's simple supply and demand. Many authors want to be published traditionally. Very few publishers, very few opportunities to be published. So it's very competitive. On top of that, it typically takes 1 or 2 years to have to go to market. For a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs, this is just not acceptable because they want to go to market really quickly. There's also the element of losing control and rights. In my experience working with traditional publishers, if they accept your book, you won't lose too much control, but you will definitely lose the copyright in the sense that the copyright belongs to the publisher and you get a royalty. The royalty rate is fairly low. It's about 10 to 15% of net receipts. Now, you have to consider that the book publisher is taking a risk in terms of distributing you. They're spending money on your book. So they take the risk, but they take the significant majority of the upside. And then, of course, there are gatekeepers, there are delays that can happen. You need to send a proposal. I'm going to get into the proposal a little bit later. With self-publishing, though, you're looking at typically, you can get a book done within 90 days. You have full ownership. Your book is yours, and it depends a little bit on how you publish it, whether it's with Amazon or another platform, but typically it's full ownership. It's very fast to go to market. And but the other thing is that it must be done professionally to be credible. It's very easy to do it professionally. Well, it's not easy, but if you work with the right professionals, it's easy. But you have to work with the right team. And so that's one of the things that we do at Trivium Writing for our clients who self-publish. We take care of everything from the formatting of the book to the book cover design to make sure that the book is professional and credible. Now, in terms of timeline, to put things in perspective, if you are working with us, for instance, you can expect 2 to 3 months for the first draft to be done. We do a little bit of revision, editing, etc. So within 6 months, you can have a published book. It's very feasible in 2026. With self-publishing, 6 months to publishing. Now, the same client who works with us and is publishing traditionally will spend the same amount of time on the book, maybe a little bit more, but will spend about 2-3 months, maybe 4 months on the book. We'll submit it to the publisher. We have a deadline, and then the publisher takes care of the different aspects, including editing, copy editing, proofreading, formatting, book cover design, all of these different aspects of the publishing process. And so to give you an example, I have a client. We submitted last October of 2025, we submitted the manuscript to the publisher, and the book is coming out on August 31st of 2026. So that's quite a long time to go to market. And that's because they have a whole production machine, production schedule. They have, they do PR, they do marketing, they do all these things. So this is what you need to consider with traditional and self-publishing. This is something that I help everybody that I talk to figure out on a phone call. So I'll leave the I'll leave the link to book one of these conversations in the video description. The next thing that needs to be done, and this is proprietary to Trivium writing, we have a methodology called the architecture of writing that allows us to be extremely strategic about the positioning of the book, because ultimately the book has to be well positioned for what you're wanting to achieve. What you're wanting to achieve, whether it's leads, whether it's conversion, whether it's legacy, we have to figure out who is the community that you're serving, what are they talking about, that where you can insert yourself, what's your unique angle, why is that angle relevant, what goal, what are you trying to achieve with this book, what's the fundamental question that you're trying to answer, and what's your purpose, as well as what is the thesis of the book. These are all things that we figure out together, and these create the positioning. Then we have to be extremely strategic about the external architecture, which is the text itself. It goes from the topic to the text to the paragraphs, sentences, and it goes quite technical on the grammar. We won't get into this in this video because it's too much, but we have to be extremely strategic about your style and your voice. And these are things that I do for clients, analyzing how they speak, how they write, so that we can write something in their very voice. Finally, the philosophical architecture has to do with your worldview. This is also something that we figure out at the very beginning. What is your view on the relationship between these different social units? The individual, the family, the community, society, the nation, it should read here, civilization, species, universe. This is especially helpful for nonfiction books that are a bit more general, whether it's personal development, has to do with business, has to do with society. We can really map out your worldview so that your book feels substantial and is really matching your values. Then we have to figure out the type of book you're going to write. So this has to do with the goal here. There are 4 types of books you can write: descriptive books, explanatory books, persuasive books, and narrative books. Descriptive books are essentially the what. They're answering the what question. So what is X, Y, and Z? Explanatory is how to do something. For instance, How to Win Friends and Influence People is an explanatory book. Persuasive is why. Good example of that is the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And narrative is a book that is narrative in nature, that is a story. It could be a fiction book, or it could be a case study, or it could be a memoir. It could be a business book written from a character's perspective. So it's a who and a what. So each goal has a very specific type of question, and each book seeks to answer a question at some level. So our work in the strategy is to figure out the question, and oftentimes it's the burning question of the community. That's part of the conversation they're having. And you have, via your expertise and your experience, a unique angle into that conversation, so you can answer that question. So that's a huge part of the strategy. The other thing is what we call the DIKW, and I added the S, pyramid. The IKW pyramid is a well-known framework. I did not invent this one. That stands for data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. So you can think of this on a pyramid, and ultimately to write a great book that's going to position you, you're going to need all of this. So data is really just little pieces of information. It could be like numbers, could be statistics. You can turn that into information by analyzing that. And so information is an interpretation of the data in a particular field or in a particular area. When it turns into knowledge is once you've grouped all these different pieces of information, you have knowledge about a topic or something. But it's only once you figure out what to do with this knowledge that you have wisdom. And wisdom often comes from stories as well. You have stories from your life, stories from your business that you can tell. And so the idea here is that we want to look at, okay, what data, what information, what knowledge, what wisdom, what stories do you have? And we can look at these separately, but we can turn all of these data, information, knowledge, stories into wisdom. And with wisdom is really what we're looking for in a book. We want to transmit wisdom to readers. That's how we can make an impact on them. And so this leads us to a separate element, which is that there's different types of structure in a nonfiction book. One of them is the practical structure. For instance, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Every chapter is a law or a lesson, if you will. And so your book could be structured with a piece of wisdom for every chapter, or it could be grouped by theme. It could be, leadership, money, influence. These are all themes. You can have a chapter that discusses each and includes stories. Or you could have a more storytelling based book where each chapter has events that happen, and so the whole book goes through a chronology. So whichever structure you end up using for your book, and this is something that we determine together, you want to use these things, these aspects, data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, you want to use these all throughout the book. And so that's where the craft of writing really comes into play. How do we use these? How do we structure these? That's where it comes into play. Now, assuming that you are going for traditional publishing, the first step in traditional publishing is to create a book proposal that is going to be sent to agents and publishers. Agents are people that can represent you to the top publishers. For instance, Penguin, Hachette, HarperCollins, Macmillan. These top publishers are not taking unsolicited submissions from authors. You need a literary agent. And so the literary agent is somebody who accepts to work with you, and they go and represent you. They sell your book idea to these top publishers or other publishers as well, and they take a percentage of your advance. They take a percentage of your royalties. So you enter into a contract with the agent, and then you enter into contract with the publisher, with your agent. Now, some publishers, typically smaller publishers, more independent presses, don't require you to have an agent. You can go directly to them, and you can query them, and they'll reply to you. It usually takes 2-3 months to hear from them. Same thing with agent. But in both cases, you need a book proposal, and the book proposal is a simple document that contains everything from the title to subtitle to the audience, a blurb, an overview, an author bio, a big promise or transformation from the book, a table of contents, key differentiators from other books, competitive titles. Table of contents should not be here. It should be chapter samples. Typically, you need 3 chapter samples in your book proposal to give them a sense of your writing style. So if you are publishing traditionally, this is something that we do at the very beginning of the process, right after we go through the architecture. We put this together, we start the book writing process, we write the 3 chapters, we put together this proposal, and I help the client query the agents and the publishers. So that's for traditional publishing. A lot of this is still done if you self-publish a book. but we don't do it formally. We don't necessarily put it in a document, but this is all part of the homework that we need to do in order to have a properly positioned book. The next step is the expertise in extraction. So in strategic ghostwriting, once we've covered the architecture of writing, once we know exactly what we're going to write about, I make sure that I understand your journey as a person and as a business, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. And so from that, I create prompts and questions that are going to get you to talk, get you to tell your stories and expand on your ideas over Zoom. And so we do these strategic interviews, we record those, and then I write the chapters. Now, in some cases, what's really cool is if you have a lot of content already written, you have whether it's social media, whether it's blogs, things like that. If you have a lot of that content, this significantly reduces the amount of interviews that we have to do, and a lot of that can be repurposed and put together into chapters. So that's the expertise extraction phase. It's either with the content you already have or interviews that we conduct on Zoom and whose transcripts we use in order to write the chapters. Then the writing and editing happens. And when I'm talking about strategic ghostwriting, really the process is streamlined in a strategic way. So the last thing that you want from a ghostwriter is to do all these interviews, do all this work, or send a bunch of content and get them to write a book. And then they finish the book and they send you this thing, and you don't recognize your voice, you don't like it. It doesn't feel like yours. That's the last thing you want from working with a ghostwriter. So what we do is for every chapter, we send it to you and you revise it. You make sure that it's in your voice, that you feel good about it. If there are any factual mistakes, if there's anything off, then you point those out, and we make the edits and revision as we go. And so you're able to give high-level feedback saying, hey, I would never use this word. I would never phrase something like this. And so we can incorporate the feedback and not make that mistake again. And so by the end of the process, with that feedback loop and with the developmental editing that we do, we are able to essentially have a super polished first draft by the end of the process within 2 months. Could be less depending on the length of the book. But within 2-3 months, we have a super polished first draft that reads like you wrote it. And then all we need to do is do a little bit more revision, a little bit more editing, and then we move on to the formatting and publishing part. So if you are publishing traditionally, then we just send it to the publisher. They get back to us with some edits, requests. We do those together, and then we send it back, and then they take it from there. And that's where the role of the strategic ghostwriter, like myself, would end. If you are working with me and you're self-publishing, then what we would do is once we've done all the editing and all the revision, we get a professional cover design. This is contracted out or made by somebody on my team. We do the interior layout and the typesetting. This is all collaborative. I ask you to figure out, okay, what type of fonts do you like within, this set? There are different types of fonts that we can use or cannot use for specific books. And so we figure out together, okay, how do we format the book? What do you like aesthetically? Let's make the book that you're going to be proud of. Then we do all the ISBN metadata, Amazon KDP upload. This is all done for you. And then, of course, the launch planning. This is where we support you with different marketing assets you can use upon launching, and advice and strategy around how to promote your book and use it for your business. This is optional, but it's very powerful. And of course, if you are self-publishing, then you keep full ownership. And so that's the great thing about publishing via Amazon. You keep full ownership. You can use it in your funnels. You can buy author copies at cost, and you can sell them. You can send them to, you can give them to clients, you can bring them to conferences. So you retain full ownership of the book. So this is the process of strategic ghostwriting. This is how in 2026 business owners are publishing strategic books. This is being done right now. At Trivium Writing, we do a lot of this. We have a lot of clients that we're working with on ghostwriting, as well as other types of engagements, book coaching, editing, and so on. But really, in 2026, the best way to write a book without writing it yourself and without using AI is with strategic ghostwriting. So if this process resonates with you, and if this is something that you've been thinking about, and even if you're not necessarily 100% sure that's something you want to do, I would invite you to book a call with me so we can discuss your idea, what you want out of the book, and I'll pressure test whether it actually makes sense for you to write a book or not. And from there, we can look at the next steps, and we will discuss how this would look like if we were working together. All right, so the link to book a call is going to be in the video description. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy videos and tutorials about authority, influence for business and for your career. Then I highly recommend that you subscribe to this channel, because you're going to be the first to know about every single new video that's being put out. All right. I look forward to speaking with you. Bye-bye.